My name is Hannah Mitchell. I'm 33 years old. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over you when you realize the people who are supposed to know you best have been writing your story for you all along. It does not arrive with shouting. It arrives on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in a car heading north, with the phone left on speaker at the wrong moment, and two familiar voices deciding what you're allowed to want. If you have ever felt the ground shift under a conversation you were never meant to hear, you might understand why I'm telling this now. If this kind of slow, careful rewriting of who you are sounds familiar, I hope you will stay with me. Sometimes the only way to stop disappearing is to finally say the words out loud. We were driving to the cabin on the Suburb River because everything at home had come undone faster than anyone expected. A burst pipe and the sudden need for major repairs had turned what should have been a planned weekend into an unplanned stretch of weeks away. My mother Nancy had suggested it first, the way she always suggested things that already had my older sister Courtney's approval built in. Courtney had taken it from there, the way she always did, arranging the time off work for both of them, packing extra groceries, and reminding me that the cabin still had good Wi-Fi, so I would not fall behind. She framed it as generosity. I had learned over many years that her generosity almost always arrived with a set of instructions I was expected to follow without complaint. I sat in the back seat with my bag at my feet and my laptop on my knees, watching the Michigan landscape change from suburbs to pine and river. My mother drove. Her phone rested in the cup holder between the front seats, screen-lit. She had put it on speaker 20 minutes earlier when Courtney called to check on our progress. I had not been paying close attention at first. The voices were low the way they got when they thought I was absorbed in work or asleep. Then I heard my name. She told me yesterday she might look for something different once the repairs are done, my mother was saying. Her tone was the same one she used when she talked about the weather or a neighbor's new fence. Ordinary, unremarkable. I told her to wait until things settle. She gets these ideas, and then she acts like the rest of us are holding her back. On the other end of the line, my older sister's voice came through clearly calm and practiced. Just keep her close while we're up there. Don't let her start making big decisions without us weighing in. You know how she gets when she thinks she's figured something out on her own. She'll thank us later. My mother laughed softly, the sound small and fond. She always does in the end. I kept my eyes on the screen of my laptop, even though the words had stopped making sense. My hands stayed still on the keyboard. I had spent years learning how to keep my face quiet when something inside me moved. It was a skill my older sister had helped teach me without ever meaning to. The drive argument started a few miles later, the way those arguments always started with something small that was never really small. My mother mentioned that Courtney had already stocked the cabin with the coffee I liked and the extra blankets from the hall closet at home. She said it like a gift. I said gently that I could have brought my own if anyone had asked. My mother's hands tightened on the wheel. She was trying to make things easier for you, she said. Your sister works hard to keep this family running smoothly. You could show a little appreciation instead of acting like every helpful thing is some kind of trap. I did not raise my voice. I never did. I didn't say it was a trap. I said I could have packed my own coffee. From the speaker, my older sister's voice cut in again, still calm. Mom put me on speaker if you haven't already. Hannah, I can hear the tone. We're all in this together right now. The last thing any of us needs is you turning a simple gesture into a problem. I'm the one who made the calls to get the time off. I'm the one who made sure the cabin was ready. You could at least meet us halfway. I looked out the window at the trees sliding past. The Osable River was somewhere ahead, wide and steady the way it had been every summer of my childhood. I thought about how many times I had tried to meet them halfway and ended up further back than where I started. My mother glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Your sister has always looked out for you. Even when you were little and your father left, she made sure you had what you needed. She stepped up when she didn't have to. You don't get to act like that doesn't matter now. The words landed the way they always did, wrapped in the story we had all been told for years. Courtney had been the steady one. Courtney had held things together. Courtney had been generous with her time and her money and her plans so the rest of us would not have to struggle the way she claimed we would have without her. I had heard the story so often that for a long time I believed the only reason it felt wrong was because something was wrong with me. I stayed quiet for the rest of the drive. When we finally turned onto the narrow road that led to the cabin, the late afternoon light was already thinning between the trees. The cabin itself sat back from the river, the same dark wood and stone. It had always been the porch light already on, even though none of us had arrived yet. Someone had thought to turn it on ahead of time. My older sister's car was parked in the gravel drive. She stepped out onto the porch as we pulled in, waving once the way she always waved, like she had been waiting, and we were exactly on time. She looked composed, the way she always looked. Her hair pulled back, and her sweater neat, even after the drive from her place. She smiled at my mother first, then at me. "Long trip," she said. "Come on inside." I already started a fire and put the kettle on. "Hannah, I brought the throw blanket from your old room. I thought you might want something familiar." I thanked her. The words came out steady. I carried my bag up the steps and set it by the door, the way I had done every summer since I was small. Inside the cabin smelled like wood smoke and the cedar chest my mother kept in the corner. Everything was exactly where it had always been, except for the small ways my older sister had already rearranged it to make it better. Sarah Bennett called while we were still unpacking the car. She lived 20 minutes down the river road and had known our family since before I was born. She had been the one who first told my mother about the cabin being available for an extended stay. When the repairs at home became more than anyone expected. Sarah's voice on the phone was warm and practical, the same voice that had helped us through other hard seasons. "I saw your lights come on," she said, when my mother answered. "If you need anything extra wood or someone to check the generator, just call Jason. He's been keeping an eye on the place for the association. He'll be by in the morning to make sure everything's running right." Jason Cole was the local handyman who had been maintaining the cabins along this stretch of the Osable for years. I had met him once or twice, On previous visits, a quiet man who knew the river and the trees and did not ask unnecessary questions. I did not know yet how much he would end up seeing. That first evening passed in the careful rhythm my older sister preferred. Dinner was simple, the kind of meal she had always said was easiest for everyone. She asked me about work in the same gentle tone she used when she was about to offer advice I had not asked for. My mother sat at the head of the table, the way she always had, listening more than she spoke, her eyes moving between the two of us, like she was keeping score without meaning to. Later, after the dishes were done and the fire had burned low, I stepped out onto the back porch that faced the river. The air was cool for early summer, the kind of cool that reminded you the water was still high from the spring melt. I stood there for a long time, listening to the current and trying to name the feeling that had been sitting under my ribs since the car. It was not anger. Anger would have been easier. It was the older, quieter thing I had carried for years, the knowledge that every time I tried to name what was happening, the story that came back was the one my older sister and my mother had already agreed on. I was difficult. I was ungrateful. I was the one who needed managing for my own good. Inside, I could hear my mother's voice again, low and steady on another call. I did not go back in right away. I stayed on the porch until the lights in the living room went off and the cabin settled into the kind of silence that only exists when everyone has decided the day is over. I did not sleep well that night. The bed in the small room at the end of the hall was the same one I had used as a child, the quilt still smelling faintly of cedar. I lay there listening to the river and thinking about how many versions of my own life I had accepted, because the people who loved me had told me they were true. The next morning, Jason Cole arrived early, just as Sarah had said he would. He knocked once on the front door and waited on the porch with his toolbox the same patient way he had always waited. When my older sister opened the door, he nodded to her and then to my mother, and then his eyes found me where I stood at the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee. "Morning," he said. His voice was low and even. "Sarah mentioned you might need the generator checked and the dock looked at. I can do both before I head to the next place, if that works." My older sister smiled the smile she used when she was in charge of the moment. "That would be perfect, Jason. We are so grateful you could come out on short notice. Hannah, why don't you show him the dock while Mom and I finish breakfast? You know the path better than we do these days." I set my mug down. I did not argue. I walked with Jason down the narrow path to the water, the pine needles soft under our feet. He did not fill the silence with small talk. He asked only what needed asking about the generator and the dock boards that had shifted over the winter. When we reached the water's edge, he crouched to check the mooring and spoke without looking up. "Been a while since I saw all three of you up here at once," he said. "Your sister usually comes alone, or with your mom. She keeps the place in good shape. Tells everyone it's her project." I watched the river move. She likes things organized. Jason nodded, once the way people do when they have decided not to say more than they need to. He finished checking the dock stood and wiped his hands on a rag from his back pocket. "If you need anything while you're here, Sarah has my number. Or you can leave a note at the association office downriver. They know how to find me." He left a few minutes later, the sound of his truck fading down the graveled road. I stayed by the water a little longer, letting the current do what it always did, which was keep moving, no matter what story anyone told about it. Back at the cabin, breakfast was already on the table. My older sister had made the eggs the way she knew I liked them and set the plate in front of my usual chair. My mother poured coffee without asking how I took it. They were both already talking about the day ahead, the small tasks that would fill the hours until dinner. I sat down and ate what was in front of me. I answered when I was spoken to. I kept my voice even, but something had shifted in the space between the overheard call in the car and the quiet morning by the river. It was not a loud shift. It was the kind that happens when you finally stop pretending you do not already know the ending of the story you have been living inside. I did not say anything about it that morning. I did not need to. The river kept moving. The cabin stayed warm. My older sister and my mother kept arranging the hours the way they had always arranged them. And I sat at the table with them, gentle on the outside, and began very quietly to count the days. The way someone counts something they know they will one day have to leave behind. The next morning, the river was still moving outside the window, steady and indifferent. But the quiet inside the cabin had changed shape. I woke to the sound of my older sister already in the kitchen, the kettle whistling, and the low murmur of her voice as she spoke to my mother about the day ahead. They were making plans that included me, without asking what I wanted from the hours. I lay there for a few extra minutes, listening the way I had learned to listen when I was younger, and still believed that hearing everything would eventually help me understand how to belong. I got up dressed in the same careful way I always did when I wanted to give nothing away, and went downstairs. Courtney stood at the stove in one of the old flannel shirts that had belonged to our father before he left. She smiled when she saw me, the same warm, practiced smile she had used since we were girls. "Morning," she said. "I made oatmeal the way you used to like it when you were little. Extra cinnamon, no raisins." Mom and I thought we could go through some of the old boxes in the storage room later. There are things in there from when we were kids that you might want to look at before we decide what to keep. My mother sat at the table with her coffee, already dressed, already composed. She nodded as if the decision had already been made for all of us. "It'll be nice to go through them together. Your sister has such a good memory for these things. She always knows what's worth saving." I sat down and ate the oatmeal. It tasted exactly the way it had when I was 10. I thanked them both. The words came out steady and quiet, the way they always did. When I was choosing not to start something, I knew I could not finish on my own terms. Later that morning, while my older sister was on the phone with the cabin association about a small repair, I stepped out onto the back porch with my own phone. I texted Rebecca Lane, the co-worker who had become something closer to a friend over the last 2 years. She was one of the few people who had ever listened when I tried carefully to describe what it felt like to be managed by the people who loved me most. The reply came quickly. "You okay up there? If you need an excuse to get out for a day, I can call with a work emergency. No judgment if you take it." I did not take the offer. Not yet. I wrote back that I was fine, that the river was beautiful, that I would be back in a few weeks when the repairs at home were done. I did not tell her about the car ride or the voices on speaker. Something still felt too private to hand over even to someone who had never tried to rewrite them for me. Daniel Torres called a little after 10. He was my boss at the small design firm where I had worked for 4 years, a steady man who rarely asked for more than the work itself. He needed a file I had left on my home computer and asked if I could remote in or send it from the cabin. I told him I could handle it by the afternoon. He thanked me, and then, in the same even tone he used for project deadlines, said, "Take the time you need up there. Family stuff has a way of taking longer than you expect. Just don't let it eat the whole month." I promised I would not. When I hung up, my older sister was standing in the doorway, to the porch, arms crossed loosely, the way she stood when she was about to offer help that would cost something. "Work?" she asked. "Just a file," I said. She nodded like she already knew the answer. "I told Mom we should make sure you have good cell service while we're here. I called the provider yesterday and had them check the tower nearest the river. You shouldn't have any dropped calls now. I know how important your job is to you." It was generosity again, wrapped around control. She had made a call on my behalf without asking. She had decided what I needed and then delivered it as a gift. I thanked her again. The pattern was so old, it almost felt normal. That afternoon we went through the storage room, the way my older sister had suggested. The boxes were stacked against the back wall, labeled in my mother's handwriting from years ago. Most of them held the ordinary debris of a family that had once believed it would stay whole. Old school papers, faded photographs, a few of my father's tools that no one had ever thrown away. My older sister directed the work with quiet efficiency, deciding what went into the keep pile and what could be donated. My mother sat on an old folding chair and watched occasionally, offering a story about where something had come from. I found the photograph near the bottom of the third box. It was small, the colors slightly faded, the three of us, standing on the same porch we were staying on now. I must have been 9 or 10. My older sister had her arm around my shoulders. My mother stood behind us, smiling at the camera. On the back in Courtney's careful teenage handwriting, someone had written a single line in faded blue ink. "Hannah will always need us to decide what's best for her. She doesn't know how to take care of herself yet." I read it twice. The handwriting was younger than the one my older sister used now, but it was unmistakably hers. The words were not angry. They were certain. They had the same calm certainty she still carried when she rearranged my life for me. I slipped the photograph into the pocket of my sweater without saying anything and kept sorting through the rest of the box. My mother was telling a story about a summer when Courtney had organized a family trip to the dunes without anyone asking her to. She was only 15, my mother said, but she made all the calls and packed the car and made sure we had everything. "Your sister has always been the one who steps up." I nodded. I did not mention the photograph. That evening after dinner, I went looking for the old family laptop that used to live in the cabin's small office. It had been replaced years ago at home, but I remembered it still sat on the shelf in the closet, plugged in and forgotten. I told my mother and sister I was going to look for an old file for work. They did not question it. I carried the laptop to the small desk in my room, closed the door, and turned it on. The machine was slow, the battery weak, but it still worked. The desktop was cluttered with old folders, most of them empty or holding nothing important. One folder labeled simply, "Family" had not been touched in years. Inside it were dozens of emails, all from my mother's old address to my older sisters. The date stretched back almost 8 years. None of them had been deleted. I opened the most recent one first. It was from 3 months ago. My mother had written Hannah mentioned again last night that she might look for a new apartment closer to the city. I told her to wait until after the holidays. She listened, but you know how she gets when she starts thinking. She can do things on her own. I'll keep an eye on it. The reply from my older sister was short. Good. Let me know if she brings it up again. I'll handle it when we're all together. I closed that email and opened another, then another. They went back years. My mother reporting conversations I had thought were private. My older sister responding with instructions on how to steer me, how to frame my choices as mistakes I would eventually thank them for fixing. There were details about jobs I had considered and then not taken, about friends I had stopped seeing because my mother had gently suggested they were not good for me, about the quiet plans I had made and then abandoned because the weight of their certainty had always felt heavier than my own doubt. I sat there for a long time after I stopped reading. The river moved outside the window. The cabin was quiet. Somewhere downstairs, my older sister laughed at something my mother said. The sound was ordinary and warm, the sound of two people who had never questioned the story they were living inside. I did not confront them that night. I closed the laptop, put it back in the closet, exactly where I had found it, and went downstairs to say goodnight. My older sister asked if I needed anything before bed. I told her I was fine. My mother reminded me that Jason Cole would be back in the morning to finish the dock work, and that Sarah Bennett had offered to bring fresh bread from the bakery in town. I thanked them both again. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, with the photograph still in my sweater pocket. The line on the back felt heavier now that I had seen the emails. It was not just an old opinion. It was a plan that had been followed for years, with my mother as the quiet messenger and my older sister as the one who decided what the plan should be. I did not cry. I had learned a long time ago that crying changed nothing in this house. Instead, I sat very still and let the knowledge settle. The controlled narrative they had built around me was starting to show its seams. The photograph and the emails were proof that the generosity had always been a form of management, that the story of my older sister, as the one who saved us, had been written to keep me from writing any story of my own. I knew I would have to decide what to do with that knowledge. I also knew that whatever I chose, it would cost something I had once believed I could not afford to lose. The river kept moving outside the window. I stayed awake long after the rest of the cabin had gone dark, counting the days the way someone counts something they are no longer sure they will be allowed to keep. The next morning I woke with the photograph still folded in the pocket of the sweater I had left on the back of the chair. The river moved outside the window the same steady way it always had, but the quiet inside the cabin felt thinner, like something had already begun to give way, even though no one had spoken the words out loud yet. I dressed slowly, the way I had learned to do when I needed time to decide how much of myself I was willing to show. Downstairs, my older sister was already at the table with coffee and a list she had made on the back of an envelope. My mother sat across from her listening as Courtney explained the order of the day, finish going through the last boxes, take a walk along the river path together, and then decide what to do with the old photographs before we headed back to the repairs at home. It was all framed as a plan that would make things easier for everyone. I sat down and poured my own coffee without waiting for her to offer. I found something yesterday, I said, keeping my voice even. I took the photograph from my pocket and laid it on the table between us, the faded writing on the back, facing up. I was going through one of the boxes, like you suggested. This was at the bottom. My older sister picked it up. She read the line she had written years ago, the one about me always needing them to decide what was best. For a moment, her face stayed exactly as it always was, calm and certain. Then something small shifted behind her eyes. I was a teenager when I wrote that, she said. I was trying to help. You were having a hard time after Dad left. Mom and I both were. My mother reached for the photograph. She read it and set it down again without looking at me. Your sister has always looked out for you. She said the same sentence she had used for years, even when it was hard. We only ever wanted what was best for you. I nodded once. I had expected the reframing. It was the same way they had always turned my questions back into proof that I needed managing. I kept my hands flat on the table. I also found the old laptop in the closet, I said. The one that used to stay here. It still works. There are emails in it, years of them. From you, Mom, to Courtney. Telling her every conversation I thought was private. Every plan I mentioned. Every time I said I wanted something different for myself. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. My older sister set her coffee cup down carefully, the way she did when she was choosing her next words with precision. Those emails were between family, she said. We were worried about you. You make decisions that don't always turn out well for you. We were trying to keep you from making mistakes you would regret. My mother nodded. We never meant to hurt you. We just knew you better than you knew yourself sometimes. I looked at both of them. The hurt was there, steady and old, but it no longer felt like something I had to swallow so the table could stay peaceful. I spoke slowly, the way I had practiced in my head during the night. I'm not asking you to agree with me, I said. I'm telling you what I found and what it means. I'm not going to keep living inside a story where my choices are treated like problems that need fixing by the two of you. I'm not going to keep thanking you for managing me and calling it love. My older sister's voice stayed calm, but the edge underneath it sharpened. You're overreacting because you're here and everything feels close. When we get back home and the repairs are done, you'll see this differently. You always do. I said. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they did not waver. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll stay with Rebecca Lane until I figure out the next step. I won't be coming back to the house after the repairs. And I won't be coming back here. My mother's face changed. Then the first real crack in the certainty she had carried for so long. Hannah, you can't just walk away from your family because you found some old emails. We're all we have. I know, I said. That's why I have to go. My older sister stood up. She did not raise her voice. She never had to. If you leave like this, you're choosing to throw away everything we've done for you. The cabin, the help with your life, all of it. You'll regret it. I might, I said. But I would regret staying more. I stood too. I did not slam the chair or raise my voice. I simply walked upstairs, packed the few things I had brought, and left the photograph on the table where they could see it. I called Rebecca Lane while I folded my clothes. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her I needed a place to stay for a while, she did not ask for the whole story. She just said her spare room was open, and Marg would help bring my things from storage if I needed it. I thanked her and hung up before the tears I had been holding back could reach my voice. Jason Cole came by that afternoon to finish the dock work. He saw my bag by the door and did not ask questions. He only said that Sarah Bennett had mentioned the cabin sometimes felt smaller, and too many people tried to fit inside it at once. I nodded. He left the way he always left, quiet and steady, the way people leave when they have learned not to take sides in stories that are not theirs. That evening, I sat on the back porch. One last time. My mother came out after a while and stood beside me without speaking for several minutes. When she finally did, her voice was tired in a way I had not heard before. "Your sister is upset," she said. "She thinks you're punishing her for caring too much." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm choosing not to disappear inside the version of me she needs me to be." My mother was quiet again. Then she said, "I don't know how to be in a family that isn't the way it's always been." "I don't either," I said. "But I'm going to learn." She went back inside without answering. I stayed until the light left the river completely. The next morning, I left before they were awake. I wrote a short note and left it on the kitchen table next to the photograph. It said only that I loved them both, that I was grateful for the years they had carried me, and that I could not keep letting them carry me in a direction I no longer wanted to go. I did not promise to call. I did not say when I would be back. I drove south, with the windows down the cold morning air, moving through the car, the way the river had moved outside the cabin. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel free in the way stories sometimes promise. I felt the weight of what I had chosen to lose the cabin. The old stories, the version of family that had always made room for me, only if I stayed inside the lines they drew. The loss was real. It sat beside me in the passenger seat and did not move. Rebecca and Mark Ellison met me at their house that afternoon. Mark helped carry my bag inside, while Rebecca made tea and did not fill the silence with questions I was not ready to answer. Over the next weeks, I stayed in their spare room, found a small apartment closer to the city, and took the job change I had been circling for months. Daniel Torres gave me a reference without asking why I needed it so suddenly. Elena Vargas, the therapist I started seeing, listened when I described the photograph and the emails and did not tell me I was overreacting. Patricia Moore, an old friend of my mother's, who had quietly watched the same pattern for years, called once after she heard I had left. She said only that she was sorry it had taken me so long to believe I was allowed to stop disappearing. My older sister and my mother did not call. The controlled narrative they had built did not collapse in the way I once imagined it might. They simply rewrote the ending without me in it. I heard through Sarah Bennett that my older sister had told people I had decided I needed space and that the family was giving it to me. The generosity remained intact on their side of the story. The cost of that story was mine to carry. I go back to the river sometimes, but not to the cabin. I walk the public paths and watch the current move the way it always has, without needing anyone's permission. The old stories are still there, but they no longer get to decide who I am inside them. I lost the cabin and the inherited memories that lived inside its walls. I kept the part of myself that had been quietly waiting to stop being managed. Blood relation does not equal love. Real family never makes you disappear. Sometimes, the only way to stop disappearing is to walk away from the people who need you to stay small so their story can stay simple. The choice is lonely. It is also mine. Thank you for staying with me through all of this. If this story stayed with you, write this one. If it hit deep, I'd love to hear how you chose yourself when the people who should have loved you best tried to write your story for you.